All right. All right. So, Ani, bonjour, everyone. Thank you for being here today. If we can do a little bit of housekeeping, because everybody likes to have that little bit of alphabet soup with the carrot on a stick, right? Your little reward. If you can put your name and where you're at in the chat. So then that way, when we're done, Hillary sends that to me. And then we have McKenna, our lovely assistant, make you out a certificate for your hours of doing parent engagement stuff with us. So we would appreciate if you throw that in there. Also, for a little bit of housekeeping, you're going to have some videos today because it's just Cressy and I here today. But there will be some videos that we have loaded to the YouTube page exclusively for all of you, which means that they are unlisted. So we will be sending Hillary a list of the videos and the video links for YouTube, so you can go back and look at those. So you don't have to watch the whole recording if you just want to really hear that parent voice. And so make sure that you are in there, so then that way she knows who to send this to when I send her this document later. So with that, let's talk about money, right? Make it rain. I was told I can't say it's all about the Benjamins because that would have dated me for the music I actually listened to. So they were like, Meredith. I was like, well, so I'm going to go ahead. So we are here today with Cressy Vargo, one of our other Mitten Mamas. So I'm going to have her start taking it off and introduce.
Hi, so I'm the one not in the picture.
That was Mia's birthday.
Yeah, so Mitten Mamas as a collective, even though I'm not in the picture, I worked with these ladies through some projects at ECIC, which is the Early Childhood Investment Corporation in the state of Michigan, and they oversee all of our preschool and childcare Great Start to Quality programs. We all started with that project, and then there was kind of a spin-off, and I wasn't able to join this part of it until a little bit later because I was in grad school and just there are only so many hours a day. I'm really excited to be here today. I think that there's a lot of valuable information in this presentation and a lot of food for thought, because some of it you may be already doing, and that is absolutely fabulous. And some of it may be an opportunity for growth.
Absolutely.
So, Meredith?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that Cressy and I are here today. Like, we didn't get this in the recording earlier, but one of the great things, like, you guys are living in real time parent engagement and involvement, right? So we have Mitten Mamas from all over the state. We have a core group, which also includes Mia, Monique, and Kara. Monique and Kara are actually doing some community granting out, which is great. So they are really taking the lead on making sure that their community is receiving some funds by actually being on the boards that's granting money out to the community. And then Mia is not feeling well. Every single one of us Mitten Mamas has either a chronic health condition themselves or cares for several family members who also have chronic health conditions. And so this is what's really cool. If you go back and look at some of our prior things, like getting to know your families, making sure that parents know each other so you can really build that strong foundation with each other to do what we're doing today, which is tag teaming, right? To making sure that we can still get that out there, but also understanding that parents have lives and they may not show up because of the other things that are just happening in the world. And so I really want to acknowledge the three ladies who are not here with us today, but also help develop this curriculum. That's you, Cressy.
Sorry. So today we're going to talk about policies around a consistent stipend. Starting off with, are you paying appropriately? Everyone's favorite, childcare and transportation, and then the least favorite, unless you're the staff accountant, paperwork and payments.
So we're going to start right off the bat. What I love about this video, so we gave a task to Kara and Monique to make some videos for us a couple weeks ago. I apologize that they are a little hard to hear, but they are very good. And I left in their bloopers because if you know me, I like a good laugh. Okay.
So reimbursement.
Yeah.
Reimbursement. How we feel parents should be paid. Um, Pros and cons and stuff. So uh, after a meeting, I feel like there should be definitely be talked about before any type of reimbursement or even before the job. It should be stated on how parents should be paid and how they're going to be paid, what they're going to be paid, how they're going to be paid, and when they'll be paid. Um, in that timeline order for the fact that it can get confusing, especially if you have reoccurring meetings and if you don't get paid right after or if you have to wait. Right, do we have to introduce ourselves?
That's totally not. You're gonna do this. That's not what we pre-discussed, but. Okay.
So reimbursement.
Yeah.
Reimbursement.
So what I love about this is they really have you start thinking about part of that pitch, right? So we talked about this in our last webinars, like how, when, who, what times, what places, how all of that works. So when we were developing and talking to other parents around, like, because we interviewed 220 some odd families across Michigan for policy change work. And when we were talking to them, we were talking about like what makes sense. Like reimbursements, I'm not going to lie, you guys, is such a sticky situation. It's not a one size fits all. Or it could be if you wanted it to be. It doesn't mean it's going to be a good plan. But really looking at the fact that there, at least in our view, there's really 3 different buckets that you can categorize in a really good way. And so we listed them out here, and I want you to know that each one of these amounts does not include childcare and does not include transportation. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Why? Because of IRS and federal regulations about why we don't include those in these amounts. But I think it's to know that like this first one where we have as an advisor. So what does advisor mean, Meredith? That means a family member or a family who's doing something once or twice. So maybe you put out a survey, okay? And you're going to give a flat fee for that survey, right? It's a 15-minute survey for them to read, for them to fill out, and there's a flat fee for that advisor bucket. Now, it could be that then you maybe ask a family, hey, we got all this information. Would you mind taking a look at it and seeing if it makes sense, right? It's a one or two time shebang, and then it's done. Okay. So really looking at it's not a big commitment. It's a small commitment, but you still have to reimburse for that person's time. And then we have something that we call the partner bucket. So the partner bucket would be if you have parents who are coming to consistent meetings, right? So maybe you have 4 meetings a year. And this is around a steering committee for a specific issue, right? This is maybe something that is a policy council meeting where they're coming once every month. Now, I think it's important to note that we have $25 to $50 per meeting, but that means that this meeting is with an hour to an hour and a half. Okay, that these are not half a day meetings in this bucket. If that's the case, this is the bare minimum that you should reimburse parents for. So what's really nice about a flat fee, and we're going to get into some of that paperwork later, it's very confusing for families if we're meeting for an hour and 45 minutes, but you only allow me to bill for the 15-minute increments, and then I have to figure that out. And so a flat fee is really nice just for my brain to work and for my family budget, because we're going to talk about why it's important that you're consistent with your payments with benefit cliffs too. And then we have something we like to call the change agent bucket. Now, this would be some of the work that families do to inform and create policy, okay, or inform and create the actual change. And I like to give the example of the Leadership Institute that all the Mitten Mamas did for ECIC. We got paid $18 an hour. Okay. Now this is going to sound like, oh my God, she called them out. Well, yeah, I am, because that's part of the honesty about why we do what we do. Okay. We got paid $18 an hour to do that work. Now that work is now being purchased by other states just for the theory of change. And so that organization is making this money off of something that they paid $18 an hour for parents. That is a systems change framework about equity and inclusion. And so really looking at that, that's not an appropriate amount. Staff is usually paid more than $18 an hour. And so if you are really looking for a parent who is a change agent, who is creating a program, who sits on an executive board of something, that would be what we would say is a change agent, and they should be being paid an education consultant's rate. If we look across the board, this $120 did not come out of the sky. I actually researched it out for education consultants. And so Grandma Google is a wonder, because she can tell you with the infinite wisdom about how much education consultant would be paid. And it's about $120 an hour across the board. So really looking at, what are you having your parents do? Now, there are some things that when we looked at these buckets, because they're not a one size fits all, there's things that you have to consider, right? When we look at Michigan State University, because we have a parent named Megan who sits in, it's great because she sits in their like reimbursement hub. So we tapped her and we said, hey, Megan, like, what are y'all giving at the university? And she's like, oh, well, we pay $100 flat. So whether it's a survey, whether it's a meeting, whether it's an event, it's $100. And that's what they do for their reimbursement. So even being on par with other high-level educational institutions, right? These are the bare minimums that we suggest, and these do not include a child care stipend or transportation stipend. Now, Cressy, I know that you had an experience with some of this. If you want to just share that.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I did an in-person training with an organization or group here called Parent Leadership in State Government. And it was a 2-day in-person training. They did do mileage and childcare, and it was a few years ago, so I don't remember what those rates were. But the rate for the stipend itself was $200 for the 2 days. And that was paid by check. But the part that kind of sticks out to me now is I followed them on Facebook, and I saw, during COVID, they had transitioned this meeting to Zoom. And I was reading it because I like to share the opportunity for other parents to do this training, because I did think it was a really good training. And then all of a sudden now it's $75 for the same training. And I was like, wait a minute. Why is it now less? Is my knowledge or value, like, how did the parent knowledge value go down just because they're virtual and not in person? That really did not make sense to me, because if you're paying or reimbursing, however you want to word it, for the knowledge and expertise of the parent, how that expertise is delivered shouldn't impact how they get paid for it.
And I think that hits on some points of your what are you asking when you do this reimbursement, right? So is this partner in a flat fee? Is this per meeting, right? Are you meeting 4 times a year? How are you meeting? Things to take in consideration. Are you doing a pre and post game, right? We highly, highly encourage those, by the way. Like, we cannot tell you, like, those came out of necessity, and we created those to better build community, right? And look at what we're doing now. Now we are change agents. But in that partner setting, are you doing pre and post game? Are you including that in that fee? Or are you doing those separately? So even thinking about, what am I asking parents to do? If I am sitting in the partner bucket, knowing that I maybe have a steering committee meeting, right? Am I having to look at materials beforehand? So then that way I know what's going on in the agenda. Am I looking at the policy that you're going to be bringing forward? So really taking a look to see, what are you asking? So that I want to touch on that. Now, this is where this gets very muddled, folks, okay? Because we're going to talk about this. This is the benefits cliff, and Meredith is going to get real technical real fast, okay? So what I did, so when we talk about the benefits cliff, we're talking about families, and we know that some of the families that you are, I think it's tasked with, correct, to work with, are families that are utilizing state assistance. So what I did was this lovely chart right here on the left, that is your SNAP benefit only. Okay, so that is your food supplement program, food stamps. Now, when we're looking at this and we're talking about families and reimbursing them, because it is considered earned income, if we get to the W-9 1099 portion, which we'll cover in just a second, if they are making over $599, they have to claim that income. Okay. So while you may want to be giving someone a consulting rate, I'm going to tell you how this affects families, because this has affected my family in this way. Several years ago, when I was doing this work and I was getting paid $18 an hour, and I was literally $84 under the threshold to receive state assistance for my family, and I then had to claim a consistent stipend, it bounced me off of my food stamps. Now, thank God I could go over to tribal commodities and they don't care because those systems aren't combined, and I could get food that way. But the amount of money that I made that bounced me off of my state assistance did not supplement my household budget. So what I mean by that is, because I made that extra $84, it bounced me off my food stamps, which then left me $350 in the hole. And the amount of money that I got from my parent involvement for my stipend ended up putting my family in the negative with our family household budget. This is a real thing. This is why we cannot drive home enough how important it is that you know your families and you know their circumstances. And if they're willing to share those with you, because there's nothing worse than getting bounced off your services because you're trying to uplift your community and make it better. So I put those in here because this is not including Medicaid, Medicare. This is not including SSI, Social Security Disability. And there's a whole nother component of this of Social Security Disability if it is your child and how much income you can have. And so you never want someone to come into the space and want to do this good work, and then it throws stress and turmoil already into their family. So let's talk about W-9s and 1099s. What is this, right? So a W-9 is an IRS form that you have to have if you are doing consultant work, if you're getting paid, right? And you have to report that as a 1099 if that amount goes above $599. That's a federal across the board. So what this does for families is, if I am a change agent and I just made $2,000 for the year, right? I might also now be in a different tax bracket. And so that means I might have to pay 23% of that $2,000 back to Uncle Sam. This can be very upsetting for families if you're used to getting your return, because that actually helps you keep up on your gas and on your electric and like make your car payment, you know, because you might have let that slip a little bit. Because let's be very clear, families are not thriving, they are surviving. And so really looking at that, are your rates going to affect your families this way? And don't worry, we got some workarounds. I'm sure your accountants won't like them, but we know as families what works and what doesn't work and how we can make it work, okay? So really looking at that, knowing your families and being upfront with your families. They might not know this until the end of the year when they go to get their taxes done and they're like, whoa, like that $2,000 just totally threw off how I'm going to pay my electric bill because I'm used to getting that return. I think it's really important to note too that these rates, and this is just for SNAP, these rates will change every year. In some of these forms, when you have them, will say 120% above poverty level. Well, what is that? The federal government changes that every year. And so that may not be consistent. What was consistent last year may not be consistent this year. And that's really important to know. If you have families who are on Social Security Disability, or one of their family members, let's say they have an autistic child who's on Social Security Disability, they can only make X amount of money. Those need to be very clear conversations with your families after you build trust to have those conversations with your families. Cressy, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add to this.
No, I think you've covered it pretty well.
All right. So now we have kind of like our buckets, our benefits, Cliff. Let's get into how Kara and Monique see some of these reimbursements.
So, Monique, what do you think is like the most frustrating way of, or one of the most annoying ways you've been paid with any of the boards or groups, parent leadership systems you've been on?
I'm still waiting for one particular payment. So I'm getting to a story, well, an experience, real life. I was on this board, and it was told that we were going to do 4 meetings, and then we were going to be paid after the 4. And we had to complete 4 of those sessions, or all 4 sessions, to be paid. And completed all 4 sessions, and still was no reimbursement. And then I reached out, communicated, and was asking when we were going to be paid, and they said we had to do another segment of another 4 meetings to do this. And I think your husband Ray was on that board with me.
Yeah.
Has he gotten paid?
No, he hasn't been paid. This is the one that
So-
was back in November, right, of last
Yeah,
year?
it started back in November. Yeah, it started last
Wow.
year. And here, practically a year later, we still haven't gotten paid. And
And then they threw a 3rd session
Yeah.
of 4 meetings and on it too.
Yep.
Correct? Yeah.
yes, I still send out emails, and now the past few emails have no response on their end, on no type of letting me know on if we're even going to get paid, because now I'm questioning it.
So the original agreement was committing to 4 meetings
Mhm.
within a 3-month period, and then ended up being 3 sessions of
Like what's that?
12 meetings,
12 meetings.
and neither one of you, so no parents were paid
Correct. But I'm pretty sure the staff and everybody got paid, that it was
every day.
assigned,
Yeah, I would
But-
think so.
and they I'm a very active parent, so my voice, and I know your husband is too, we speak up when we have input and our opinions and stuff, so it's not like we weren't attentive or non-active or just there. So it's very frustrating, and the lack of communication, and
Yeah.
like how many emails, and then I don't know who else to chain of command on, who else I can contact to be able to even initiate another conversation about this. So
Right. At a loss as to who to go to next.
right.
And I was just invited to a board that asked me if I was interested in joining, and they would pay me $50 a meeting, and that they meet 4 times a year, and after the calendar year they would pay. Never
Really?
said how long the meetings were, if they were in person, if there was any childcare reimbursement, mileage reimbursement, what was expected out of the time. Just 4 times a year, we'll pay you 50. I have no idea like how long of a time, and then be paid at the end of the year. And I'm just like, why wouldn't I be paid for what I did the day I did, like at the time? So that's
Right.
always, because I'm sure, like you said, the professionals are being paid
Exactly.
the day they're working.
Right. I mean, not the day of, but
Yeah, that pay period.
Yeah, that's crazy. Only once a year, and it's like, but how do you keep track? I mean, do you keep track of your own? Or communication. I feel like communication is definitely key on reimbursements when it comes to paying parents.
So I think that like, if we can put things in a nutshell, communication is key when paying parents, right? So you just heard from them about this like we did work in November, but we haven't seen that yet. And then things got expanded on, but that wasn't what we were told. So, and I'm going to be very frank, we hear this a lot. We experience this a lot. We did this work months ago and my electric bill was due months ago, along with my internet bill to hop on there, but I haven't received a payment. Communication is key. That is key to parent reimbursements across the board.
So, Monique, what do you think is like the most frustrating way of, or one of the most annoying ways you've been paid with any of the boards or groups, parent leadership systems you've been on?
I'm still waiting for one particular payment. So I'm getting to a story, well, an experience, real life.
Sorry about that. So let's look at childcare. So now we have our buckets done, right? We're looking at our different ways that we can and do get paid as parents. Cressy, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about what we've learned about childcare reimbursements?
Sure. So first and foremost, childcare comes in many forms. Like we have parents who have children in childcare in a licensed childcare facility that they're paying for. We have other people who utilize a friend, family member, babysitter, whatever you want to call it. And so everybody's situation is unique in how they receive childcare, but also tying into that is the rates. We all know systemically that childcare workers are underpaid. So if you are reimbursing for childcare, are you contributing to that underpayment, or are you paying what is more a marketable rate? Because also tying into that is the number of children. Using Meredith's family as an example, like she mentioned, she travels an extensive amount to come to these different in-person meetings. Well, that means that her kids are probably needing childcare outside of normal childcare center hours or for an extended period of time versus, if she was just popping down the street. So that needs to be taken into account too. Like, it's not just about the time that the parents are sitting in the meeting with you. It's about them driving there. It's about them being there, and it's about them driving home. All of those things need to be factored in. And then again, are there multiple children? So even if I've got 2 kids in a childcare center, I have to pay for both kids separately. I can't just pay that $7.50 an hour for one kid. I'm paying it for both. And the same thing is true for those that utilize, an aunt, a grandma, whatever, and they want to provide an appropriate stipend. It needs to reflect the number of children that are needing care. And one thing that just popped into my head that kind of fits in with this, but isn't necessarily one of those squares, is the age requirement. Like when we did the work with ECIC, they would only pay up to a certain age, and I think it's 12 or 13, which actually aligns with our state childcare reimbursement policy for licensed childcare. However, if I have a child that has a disability that needs a little bit different care, like if I have an autistic child that's 15, just because they're 15 doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to be home alone and self-sufficient. And so if I have to have someone there with my child because their needs are a little bit different, I should still be able to be compensated for that too, because just because my child has special needs shouldn't exclude me from participating. And so this again ties back into know your family. Like it always circles back to know your family.
Know your family. So I have 6 kids, y'all. So when Cressy's saying Meredith's needs at $7.50 an hour that we are typically reimbursed as parent leadership, that's less than minimum wage for each kid. And I think that is huge, right? Like a lot of times, as Cressy pointed out, like I live in rural Michigan. For me to get anywhere, It's a minimum. Yeah. So Michigan looks like this, right? For me to get, when I call this the Bermuda Triangle of Bay City, which is the lower half of the state, which all of these events are held at. That's my constant complaint. Why doesn't everything do anything in the rural areas, right? Why don't you come, travel where I am, where it's beautiful? But for me to get there, it's a minimum of 3.5, usually to 5 hours. And so when I'm leaving in the morning and leaving my children in care of someone at 3 or 4 in the morning to get to a meeting by 9, to then come home in the evening, and then putting a cap, because many organizations have a cap on childcare. For one organization in Michigan, it's $60. If you think anyone is going to watch 6 kids for $60 all day, you're out of your ever loving mind. The only person that does that is mom, okay? Because that's called parenting. So really looking at those and how different it is. And the fact, and I'm going to have the ladies talk about childcare, because there are many factors, especially with our children, and who watches our children. When we talk about parents' right and parents' choices, who I choose to watch my children is who I feel safe with, right? And there's this dirty word that we use called underground childcare. But in my community, that's my aunties, that's my elders. Those are people who are child rearing, who raised me, which if you ask me, they did a pretty fine job. It's not our child care centers, especially in rural Michigan. We have child care centers that don't exist. And that goes back to what Cressy introduced with, is we historically underpay our child caregivers.
I wanted to add too, real quick, Meredith, that especially if you have a parent who is participating, maybe we talked about quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, but they're not necessarily utilizing childcare every day because maybe they're not part of the workforce. They're at home with their children. We can't even get kids in childcare for parents who are working. Finding a licensed childcare that will let you do drop-in in the state of Michigan right now. Good luck. I hope you ride your magical unicorn that sprinkles glitter everywhere, because it's just about as likely. It's just not happening.
I agree with that.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the childcare, just because that one drives me insane. Like that is one of, like, the reimbursement on childcare is probably the hardest for me to wrap my head around or try to explain, like express to providers as to how difficult it is as a parent of 4 children.
Yeah.
That having a set rate of $7.50 an hour for 4 children is impossible to find.
Yeah, or even doing flat rates. I mean, I have stepchildren that I only get during the summer. I have one child throughout the year, and their whole life or whatever. But I have stepchildren that come that I need to pay for the sitter for them too when I have them. And not only that, but then my child's special needs, and so is my stepson, and they're a little harder to take care of. So a flat rate of $7.50 is definitely not cutting it.
$7.50 for what altogether? 6 kids, 7 kids? How many?
Yep.
Yeah, and then even, and I have the 4, but some during the school year, the older kids might be in school. But what if somebody's sick? And then I get the $7.50 if they're in childcare every day.
Right.
But I don't have childcare every day. But that is what maybe a home provider or even a center would end up costing.
Right.
But if you don't have that, you're calling a babysitter, and babysitters could be like $20 an hour, depending on for a child, depending on where you're at. And then, what if you're having your husband or your mother take time off of their job so that you can do this? But because they're family, they don't get to get reimbursed for their time or their energy. And it's like they're leaving work, or they're driving to me, or they're still their time is still just as valuable. Why can't I give them something?
I think that hits on so much, is really looking at your policies going forward. Oh, Jessica, if you can mute, because I'm getting feedback. If you can look at your policies going forward, are you saying who can and cannot watch children? Right? Is it center only? Because I remember being on a project with Kara and she sacrificed her family budget because it was so important for her to be at that meeting. Her husband had to take the day off and the organization was not going to reimburse her husband for parenting. And I was like, but he had to take the day off so Kara could be here. Like her household budget is now, dipped down. It's in the deficit. And so really looking at your policy going forward as you're planning out reimbursements or adjustments to your reimbursements, how are you considering childcare?
So why don't we?
So this, I think, is also really important this was like my little golden nugget that these ladies sent me the other day. Because sometimes what parents receive, because there is a lull in between the childcare gap, they actually end up having to pay more for childcare than they receive for their stipend.
So the fact that, I have my neighbor lady, she's an elder, and she doesn't have an email address. She doesn't have, she's illiterate.
Oh.
She doesn't know how to read or write, but, she can handle some kids. She knows how to babysit. Not saying like she's super old or anything.
Yeah.
She's able to care for kids. And so with like the DocuSign, I think not only do we need a signature, but they usually send an email. Like, okay, well, she has an email. Okay. She doesn't know how to sign her name. She doesn't know how to do this. It's like, well, how are we going to be able to prove if that's who, I can definitely pay her out of pocket. That's not a problem. But yeah, it shows to what you were saying, like they don't trust us.
Right. I remember at one point I was paying my child care provider $2 more an hour to watch my children than the board was paying me an hour.
Mm-hmm. But then that also shows that like sometimes our child care costs more than, it costs more for us to actually get the child care than what we're actually going to make in the meeting.
Which shows that we're very committed to what we're doing and willing to do our role as a parent leader and wanting to be involved, that I was willing to pay the $2 extra an hour to be at the table. So then to later be not trusted is actually painful.
Yeah. I completely agree.
So when we're looking at some of this is where we're like interactive, because you know what we do with interactive folks, right? Because Meredith's community does giveaways. And I want to say for anybody who's received their bag, they are pretty nice. But what we'd like to do is some interactive. So Cressy, I'm sorry, this was your slide.
That's okay. You run with it because you
I
did
know,
a
I love
fabulous
being
Vanna
Vanna
White
White.
impression with that bag.
That bag. So what are your current child reimbursement rates? Let's go ahead and either unmic or throw in the chat. Like, has this conversation maybe changed what you're thinking about as your child reimbursement rate? Do you have one? Do you want to create one? What are some of your guys' ideas?
We currently offer $20 an hour for up to 3 hours without a receipt. If it costs more, they just turn in the receipt and we cover the full amount. We don't say we just cut them a check, and whoever cared for their child, they can just pay them directly.
I love that, by the way. Here's my question. Is that considered income or reimbursement later?
That's where it's hard. So what we do is when we pay the parents, we let them decide. We have our rates and we let them know up front. Like the reimbursement is the only one per our team, our accounting team. That check has to be 1099. So they have to fill out a W-9, and that's the only thing that is countable. As for all of the other things, we have a plethora of gift cards that they're allowed to choose from, and that is not tax. So the hours that they're putting in, like the $50 an hour for this, and we did our homework on which gift cards we provide do not charge them a fee. So whichever ones aren't charging them a fee, that's what we list, and they can either receive it by mail or through email or text, whichever is easiest for them. So we do gas cards, Amazon, Target, grocery, whichever they choose. And that's them for participating. And then we have the check childcare reimbursement.
Okay, so it works a little bit differently than your stipend. Thank you for thinking ahead though. Like that cost fee associated when you have to 1099. So Vanessa is our lovely bag winner. Round of applause.
So, and we also have a comment in the chat from Renee, that her organization provides childcare on site during meetings.
So can I
Renee,
ask? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Chrissy.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, say there's a family that needs childcare, but due to special needs or transportation or some other thing, we'll just put air quotes around thing. Is there a reimbursement for those parents? You know, like on a case by case basis.
Right. We have just launched our parent advisory council. And so we haven't crossed that particular bridge yet.
Okay.
But we know that could certainly be a situation. And so we've only had, in the last month, I think 2 months now, advisory meetings where parents are coming, and we've been able to provide that on-site care. But what you're asking is definitely something that we need to have a policy around, probably sooner rather than later.
I love that you mentioned policy. We're going to put that in the parking lot because we have a way that we have worked around things by finding champions. So who can actually escalate some equitable policy. So
Wonderful.
Does anybody else want to share? What are your current childcare reimbursement rates? How do you go about making sure that parents can be involved in childcare is not a barrier? Going once? Going twice? On to transportation. So the other barrier that is often experienced with families, and how do we get around this, is transportation. So there are different things that we have talked to parents about, and some of the best practices with this. Number one, all transportation costs need to reflect the cost for those who do not have a car also, where the federal mileage rate would not apply. So typically what happens, and it's a pretty good gig, depending on where you're going, like my war pony always has to go 3.5 to 5 hours. So that's 2 tanks of gas, folks, just so we're clear. That's only one way. That's not both ways. So making sure that I have that federal mileage reimbursement, that's wear and tear on my car. And after 3 meetings, that's an oil change. So really making sure that I have that federal reimbursement rate for my vehicle, that makes sure that I can have insurance on it because I'm driving it to go to these meetings and things like that. Any parents who use public transportation, this should be reimbursed at face value. I will also let you know that we have had parents who have gone from Detroit to Lansing on public transportation. Just so we're clear, that's about an hour and 20 minutes in a car, Cressy, about that.
Mm-hmm.
But in a bus, that's them getting up at 5 a.m. so they can be to a meeting at 8 a.m. Are you making sure that their time being on that is also valued in some way? The other thing that we know that parents use around in communities when they do not have their vehicles are taxis and Ubers. And we say reimburse that at face value. So then Meredith, what is this little coin purse next to you all about? Like, what's that last symbol about? That is saying that not all families can be reimbursed and you might have to give something upfront. When I have to go to Lansing, I have to decide those 2 tanks of gas at $80+, how is that going to affect my bottom line? Am I going to be able to make it there, or am I waiting for someone to pay me 3 weeks later, but that means I can't go to the grocery store next week because I don't have that in my family budget? So even looking at, instead of a reimbursement system, but an advancement system, especially if you know that you are going to be having meetings in advance and that these things are going to be standardized. Looking at what is your mileage to go from your home to the sitter. Let's not forget that part, folks. From your home to the sitter to the meeting, back to the sitter, back home. Or if you're providing on site, then you can take that sitter piece away if they're comfortable with the sitter you're providing. So what does that look like as mileage? And can you MapQuest that so you have that documentation for an advance? So then that way your families can get down to wherever they need to be, and that's not a hindrance. Can you look at transportation if you know your family, circling back around to it's all about how you communicate and know your family's best. Can you provide a public transportation card? Can you do that in advance to them? So then that way that's preloaded and ready for them to go. And then also looking at, does your organization have the ability and the policy in place to do an Uber, a Lyft, or a ride share, something like that, where you can type in, right? Because those are things I learned how to use it when I was in California because I wasn't driving out there, where you can do an estimate. I need to be picked up here. It's going to be here and it's going to be $26, right? Or can your organization make that happen for families so they don't have to have that money up front in their account? So really looking at all of these as eliminating that transportation barrier. Cressy, did I forget anything on that?
No, I don't think so, but you kind of, the last part that you said also kind of made me think too, like if you are having a group of families, participants come from a similar location and they're, traveling to the same location, you may also look at, a car service or something along that line, depending on what's available in your area. Obviously that influences a lot, rather than 10 individual Ubers. Maybe it's cheaper to contract with a bus company and do it that way. Kind of be creative in how you think about it, because, we all get that you also have to be fiscally responsible for your agency.
Vanessa, do you want to add something?
So we live in an extremely remote and rural area where transportation does not exist. We don't have Lyft. We don't have Uber. So all of our meetings are via Zoom. We still provide a childcare reimbursement because we know that it can be overwhelming to have kiddos running in the background. So instead of using funds for transportation, what we did is we also know that not everyone has internet or devices where they can join by Zoom. So we have hotspots and Chromebooks, and our parents that are consistent, are coming all the time. We just, there you go. Like, here's a hotspot, here's a Chromebook. The only thing that we, the hotspot has to come back, Chromebook, if it doesn't come back, but they're still able to participate because transportation is, most families can't even get transportation to go to the grocery store. So that's why we kept everything on an online platform.
And I love it that you mentioned that. So I live crazy rural, just so we're clear. Like, I live in what they call the deep bush, or the sticks, depending on where you're from. In that, like in our last webinar, we talked about, like, I didn't even get internet until COVID. And that was out of necessity because the rural kids needed to go to school. So I completely understand that. And then also looking at, Vanessa, the fact that in some areas, the insurance rates, if you can't afford insurance and you don't want to ride dirty, for any of those who don't know what that means, it means you're riding without the insurance on your car. And to get stuck in that cycle, right? Like, is it practical for that family's bottom line budget to then be Zooming? And so I love that you also provide technology. That's one thing that we hit home all the time, because that can be a barrier. So thank you for that.
I'm super thrilled that she said that they recognize that people still need childcare even though they're at home.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. We all worked from home, and I know what it's like to have a kid yelling and screaming and this and that. So we said, you don't have to access childcare. If you want to have someone come watch your child or drop them off, that is available to you, because we want you to participate as fully as possible and as comfortable as you are. And if you don't, and it's also being small, like, and if you, so that's, we're trying to meet them.
I love that, because it's so rare that people get it.
No, I appreciate that. So when we were talking to families, we were talking to them about, and I forgot to put the form up there, so I apologize, because that was part of my duty that I was supposed to take over. Sorry, Cressy. We talked to parents about, all right, so now we have how much we're going to pay for the duties and tasks that we are asking about. We know that we have childcare, and we know that we have transportation to think about. What about this form? right? So this is like the practical, boring, administrative stuff that the accountants want you to have and tell you how to have it, right? When we do reimbursements with families, like these are themselves their own workshops on these forms. And I know this seems silly, but one of the things that you need to do with families is really keep it simple, because paperwork can be very overwhelming. For some communities, paperwork has been used to disenfranchise them from the system. And so we went and we were talking to parents about like what needs to be on a form. So we broke it down. Number one, every single person said, please have that date in that meeting already filled in advance. Because if you're not giving it to me in my hot little hands while I'm sitting there, like I had 10 other things that just happened and I can't remember what date that was. And then I'm fumbling through and then I get anxious about it. So our best practice is when you build a form, make sure you already have the date and the meeting title on there. The other things that we talk to families about is sectioning off your form. So all of the personal information on this reimbursement form, have it in one box, okay? Have your information for the rate reimbursement. This is why it's really important as you're coming up with your rates to think about flat rates, or are you going to do hourly? Are you paying on the quarter hour, half hour, 3/4 hour, breaking that down for families and really putting it out there. So if you knew that at this meeting, it was an hour and a half long, you could even throw that rate right in there. So parents are like, oh gosh, is that it? From 9 to 11:30? Or was that 9 to 10? And it can be very overwhelming for parents to try to pull back in. I can't remember what I had last night for dinner, you guys. I can't tell you what I did 2 weeks ago. Okay. Like same thing with meetings sometimes. Like, was that the policy? Did this? And then we have to call each other. Like, who else was on that meeting? Let me pull up that email to find out. So really making it as simple as possible and pre-filling as possible really works. Now, if you are going to be adding in a childcare line item, having that in a separate spot. So if that needs to be entered or not. And then also the transportation, if you're doing a reimbursement for mileage, making sure that is separate with the actual federal mileage rate, with the little times bar, times 0.665 equals. So that way we're not trying to find out what the heck what a federal mileage rate is, or if you're using the state mileage rate, or if you're just saying, hey, if you come, we give you $35. Like really making sure that that form is pre-filled in. Now, at the bottom is usually where that organizational piece comes in, really making sure that that says organizational use only. Or maybe that's a separate form you guys have completely, because one thing we heard all the time from some of the organizations with the forms that we were working on with parents to look at was, do I fill out this portion? Because it wasn't denoted if that is actually something that they needed to fill out or not. So really making sure that it's very clear, it's in its own separate box, maybe it's spaced down, really taking a look at that. And then having one signing space. We have come across forms that have been super confusing, where I'm signing for the meeting, I'm signing for the childcare, I'm signing for the mileage. That is super confusing. And when we talk about electronic forms and throwing that into the mix, it can be very frustrating. And oftentimes parents will be like, this is not worth the $25. Like, I'm frustrated. This is taking me 40 minutes to try to figure out. I'm done. So looking at that, also looking at the fact that your form should be ADA compatible. Remember that we do have families that are dyslexic. We do have families that are struggle with reading and reading comprehension. So really making sure that those are very clear, very concise, not using fancy fonts, making sure that they can be utilized with screen readers is really important. And then any language barriers too, making sure that families understand how to fill that out. If you're doing a reimbursement for a child care provider, making sure that they understand, because as Monique pointed out earlier, the woman that watches her kids is illiterate. And so she needs to take the time to go over and do that. So really trying to make these as accessible as possible for families is better for everyone. And then the golden rule, the golden standard that we have is, if you're in person, have them fill it out there. because then it doesn't get lost in the mix. Someone at a systems level isn't like, oh my God, I forgot to do that, and it's Friday at 4:30. And then you know that they're all taken care of right there. Any of those barriers can be addressed right there at that moment. And so really the gold standard is have them fill it out in person. Cressy, did you want to piggyback with anything?
I just wanted to add to making sure that when you consider transportation, that not only mileage, but taking into account, and it's gonna circle back to knowing your families. Any toll, I don't know if you guys have toll roads, we don't have those in Michigan, so it's not an issue. But also parking, if you had a meeting in a location that required them to pay for parking, make sure that they know that, yeah, we'll reimburse you for that, because some places are kind of pricey. So again, that's knowing your families. I just wanted to sing again, I'm sorry.
All right, so let's look at this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the crux of the start of parents melting down into not wanting doing forms, okay? So we wanted to explore, because my next slide breaks down the good, the bad, and the ugly of signature forms, whether that's DocuSign, PandaSign, Google Forms. We have it broken down to what the 4 that we typically see. So we're just curious, what do you have in place right now for signatures? Are you doing electronic documents? Are you doing the old school? Fill it out as we go, and I'm going to mail it to you. What are we doing? All right, so I know I got someone in the chat here. Google Forms. Thank you, Adriana. That when you see this next slide, that is the golden that we love for accessibility and affordability. So thank you for that. I love seeing that. Anybody else want to share what they use for signatures for these magical reimbursement forms? All right.
We use DocuSign.
Oh, DocuSign. Okay. So you're going to love what Kara has to say about DocuSign in the next slide. This is a very wordy slide. And I have no problem if y'all want to grab your cell phone and just take a picture of that real quick or screenshot it, because we purposely did it this way so you could see the pros and the cons, okay? Things that are good about it, things that are bad about it. These are all things we came across. So we have 4, technically 5, if we count the last golden standard, which is bring the form in person, DocuSign, PandaDoc, HelloSign, and Google Forms. Those are all ways, and those are the premier ways that parents are reimbursed with electronic signature. So when we look at DocuSign, yes, it's very easy. No, it is not. I cannot tell you, like, I actually have a YouTube video that I did to help other parents because it frustrated the crap out of me trying to do it. Okay. So if you are using DocuSign, you have to remember many parents are using their phone. Okay. Not having a screen in front of you when you're trying to do that can be very confusing depending on how many buckets you have to fill. So when you're looking at it from an accounting perspective, accountants love this because everything is lined up. It links in with their other systems. You're good to go. Downside, $4 a sheet. Okay. Every time someone signs, it's $4. Okay. Or at least that was the going rate last year. So $4 every sheet. Now, when you start to look at the fact that if you're doing pre and post games, as we encourage, yes, right? If you are doing pre and post games, you just spent $12 of your budget for one family. That gets very pricey. Are you, how is your budgetary constraints doing that for the ease? Now, I will tell you, from the back end as a parent, when I go to look at all of those emails that say you have a DocuSign due, and I'm like, oh crap, that was 4 days ago. And then I go to fill it out and it says, nope, you need a new form because there's a time limit on DocuSigns that is set. So then I'm like, wait a minute, what, did I not do that? Did I already do it? Why did it bounce it back to me? Why is it giving me a new one? And then I have to wait for the administrator of whoever is doing that DocuSign to then release it to me again. So there's a lot of hands on DocuSigns. There's also, if I'm doing DocuSign, And because it's coming from a standardized email, right? Just like a regular email, right? It's all the same one. If I have someone who's like, all right, every Thursday from the system perspective, I'm doing my DocuSigns. For a parent on the end of our email box, if I have 3 DocuSigns coming to me, they all look like they're from the same email. So it's the same chain. So then I'm like, wait a minute, what is this one for? What is this one for? What is this one for? And so if you don't have someone consistent who is doing your parent reimbursements with DocuSign, then the note in that may be confusing because I don't know what this was for. Was that for that meeting or this meeting? Or was this for something 3 months ago? Because believe it or not, that has happened. So really DocuSign has its beauties in the accounting world, but on a parent perspective, they are very, very difficult to navigate if you do not have the background information in the technology standard that you need to understand that. Now, PandaDoc, kind of same concept. It's a little bit more affordable. You still need to train families on how to use it. The great thing about PandaDoc is it also has the electronic signature. So if you only have families that have their smartphones, it's really, really nice for that. So DocuSign, PandaDoc, and HelloSign, accountants love because they're legally binding e-signatures. Google Forms is one that our families love the most because they're used to seeing Google and it's a free service. The problem with that is it's not, unless you have a policy in place for a check this box to e-verify that signature, accountants don't like that. But Google Forms is familiar. Google Forms is accessible. I don't need a separate doc, like a separate app to do it. And I can type my signature in and check a box instead of trying to figure out on my little phone how to make a signature and send it in on any of the DocuSign, PandaDoc, or HelloSign. So you are still going to have to train your families slightly on a Google form, not as much with the other 3. I'm telling you, you're gonna have to make like very one-on-one, and this oopsie can happen with the other 3, but Google Forms has always been the gold standard of what our families love to have and do. And so that takes a policy champion too, to say, hey, like we're going to go this way. The other thing about Google Forms is it can be integrated into accounting systems, but that's especially software like Lincoln, I think they call it, or something like that, that goes to the accounting. So if you're using Gusto, QuickBooks, CMR, like all of that kind of accounting stuff, it can be linked in there. It's just a systems cost instead of a parent cost on that. So Cressy, do you have anything to add before I pull up how Kara feels about DocuSign?
No, I think Kara and I have a shared sentiment.
So I'm going to preface this with Kara is dyslexic. And so when you're using systems, we really have to make sure that they are accessible for everybody's ability. So this is why I titled it, because I cracked up on this, you guys. It kind of cracks me up a little bit.
So, Kara, how do you feel about DocuSign?
They drive me insane. There's so many things, in my opinion, that are wrong with DocuSign. One is you have to wait until whoever's in charge of the DocuSign sends them to you, if they remember to send them to you. And then you have to, like, depending on how theirs works, like if you have to prove that your childcare is actually a real person, then you have to wait for your childcare provider to sign off on it, which is a whole nother subject as to, if you don't believe that I have childcare or that this person exists, then why am I doing this? But the additional cost that it costs the companies that are using my voice seems like, why can't you just put the money that the DocuSign into a free Google form and pay me the extra additional money an hour instead of the DocuSign cost? Because I wouldn't mind that extra money, and you save yourself the DocuSign costs. But especially like if they forget to send it, and then it's like, okay, it's been 2 weeks. Do I say something? Do I not say something? When are they gonna send it? and then I just feel like, you know, if it's not the supervisor's job to make sure that their employees are clocking in. So why is it their job to send me a DocuSign? Shouldn't I clock in myself? Like, kind of similar to that kind of thing. And then if I send in the DocuSign 2 days later for some reason because they didn't send it until Friday, and I don't check my emails over the weekend because that's family time, then it doesn't get approved by them until Monday, and I miss the pay week because they only pay every other week. So then it's taking 3 weeks before I even see my reimbursement check.
Yeah.
Besides the additional cost that it cost them, or the trouble with, you know, or what if I got mine in time, but my childcare provider couldn't figure out how to do it, and then she didn't get it in time, so then I'm waiting even longer, like it, or like the limbo land, or it's just.
Yeah. I feel you on that, on all those topics. I think I honestly like the fact that I get sent the DocuSign just because I'm so, I usually have a lot on my plate and I forget about things to actually do it, take it upon myself. So it kind of reminds me a little bit. So it definitely has its pros and cons. And, but the thing it gets hard when especially when they send it weeks later, or if it's not as recent as after the meeting, only because I'll forget which meeting it was. I mean, you and I both sit on so many things. It's like it's really hard to keep track sometimes on which meeting it was. Okay, so I mean, we're on this board, but we sit also on all these subcommittees from this board. So which one was it? And then,
or how long?
Yeah, exactly. How long was
Did
it?
It run over? Did it get cut short?
Yeah, and so if it's that time space between them actually sending it to us after the meeting, if it's not right then and there, I lose track of how long, when it was, and but the child care thing's a whole nother topic, and we can take forward.
I do have something now, Meredith.
Okay.
So Kara's comment and kind of tying back into, and then Monique's comment about subcommittees and stuff. So when I was working with Think Babies with ECIC and Think Babies Michigan, and so we have our quarterly meetings, and so that's one thing. And then I led another subcommittee. And so that was a whole different set of meetings. And so they use DocuSign. So I'd have all these different DocuSigns, but they weren't necessarily always sent out in a timely manner. It never seemed to come from the same person twice. And sometimes like that whole confusion about which meeting was that, because they weren't necessarily the same length. And I consider myself to be a fairly tech savvy person. And it was still like exactly what Monique said. Did it end on time? Did it go over? Do I include the prep? Do I not include the prep? And some of those things were not well clarified. And so I would forget to do them or just get frustrated because bringing up the DocuSign on my phone was extremely difficult for me. And I don't have an outdated phone. I have relatively good service. It was just very difficult to read on the screen because apparently I need bifocals. But and then, typing in these little tiny boxes with my fat finger, it was a challenge. And like I said, I have the technology. And so I think sometimes when people are, have maybe spotty service or, like Kara with her dyslexia and things like that, it becomes a frustration. And sometimes I'd be like, $18 an hour is not worth this.
True story. True. The frustration.
Not gonna lie. Like,
Yeah. No,
sometimes I would just be like, forget it. I'm not, you know what? I'm just gonna eat this one because of this form and my glass deductible on my phone because I'm about to check it. So there's a lot of truth in that video.
Yeah, well, and I like it's hard because some people really like it if that's, if it's accessible for them, right? If they understand how to do it, where to do it, and on the back end from the systems professional, right? Like, did
Yeah.
I label this correctly? So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into those forms before they come out. And I want to
Right.
be cognizant of time, everyone. Cressy, I don't want to interrupt you too, because I know that we can talk all day about those forms. But let's look at, so now you know how you're gonna pay people, what you're gonna pay them. How do you show me the money, right? So we have 2 slides here. And this, we're gonna talk about equitable things that we can do. Don't worry, we're gonna get to those gift cards, folks. We're gonna talk about some equitable ways to reimburse parents, right? So Cressy, what are 2 ways on this? Because this is going to be considered our most equitable. Okay. What are the ways that you've gotten paid on this?
I have gotten the Visa gift cards and checks. I
Okay.
opted out of direct deposit.
Gotcha. So go ahead, take your little snap. You're all going to have this, right? We'll send the slides. Pardon any spelling that is not Meredith's strong suit, but cash is king, y'all. And I know your accounting departments do not want to hear that, but I don't need a gift card for food because I have my food stamps. What I need is to be able to pay for my deodorant, my toothbrush, my toothpaste, diapers, wipes, my electric bill. Okay. When you're giving me, and I'm not even joking when I say this, a gift card to Ruth Christie's Steakhouse, and that is 4.5 hours away from me for $50. I'm not going to take that. And if you didn't tell me that beforehand, right? Like me. So cash is king. Really good for people who don't have banking. I want to be very clear about how the system works for families in poverty or experiencing poverty or right above the poverty level. Banking set up when we have automatic payments or we have things to do and then we get hit with overdraft, that can be detrimental to our bottom line and our family budgets. And so cash is king. The next thing, and I want to be very, very clear when we say cards, Visas only, okay? And why do we say this? Because Visas we can add into our bill payment system and pull it off. And then with the Visa, we can also, if I'm getting a Visa card for $50, I can turn around and pay that $50. And then let's say my electric bill was $84, I can pick up that other $34 through my own account, right? I can't do that with an Amazon card, folks. I can't do that with a grocery card, but I can do that with a Visa card. The other nice thing about a Visa card is I can use it at my gas station. So reloadable ones become tricky when we're looking at tracking in the amount of money that is spent for 1099s. But cash and Visa cards are great because it doesn't require me to have a banking system in order to get my stipend. So check, direct deposit, and Cash App are also on our list if you have the banking. Check is nice, but if I don't have a bank account to go check it, or if I know that I'm going to go cash that at my bank and my bank's already in the no, I walked away with no money, folks. If I go to the check cashing place, they're taking a certain amount for my check. So that $35 that you gave me now just became $28 because I had to go cash it. Okay. Direct deposit, same thing, have to have a bank account for anybody who is not documented or maybe not have a social security number. Believe me, that still happens in this day and age. And you need other forms of verification. Actually, to open up a bank, you'll have no direct deposit. What's nice about Cash App is if you have a bank account, you can put it immediately into your bank and there's a small fee, or you wait 2 days and it can go into your bank account. But they also have a Cash App debit card that you can reload. So if you're looking at app systems, which people use, and Cash App is nice because you can send to other people, right? So one reason that we've been told that Cash App is good for our parents is if I'm getting a reimbursement, I can send it right over to my daycare center, right? Like, and then I don't have to worry about the cash, and then she just Cash Apps it and she can use it, pull it, put it in a Visa card herself, whatever she wants to do.
I also want to add that a check and direct deposit assume that I have a photo identification because that's required for both. And I may not have that.
Thank you for that, Cressy. That's part of that equity, right? Cash is king. That's all we got to say. Your accounting will not like hearing me say that. There are ways around it, and that's where your policy champions come into play when we're talking about equity. So let's look at the things that are not equitable. And this is like a sliding scale down, folks. Yes, have we been paid by Zelle? You can sure bet that. Have we been paid by PayPal? We even know folks who have gotten Apple Pay. Okay, don't know how, don't know why, but this has happened. And so these are all payment options. Now, when we look at this, Zelle requires you to have a bank account still, folks. That's not good. Not everyone has Zelle. Not everybody has access to Zelle, and only certain banking institutions use Zelle. Okay. Then we have PayPal. PayPal's nice, but there's a fee associated to it. And in order to draw that money, you still need to have a bank account. Venmo, same idea. Their percentage rate to pull that money is 3 to 1%, depending on how fast you want it and the amount that you're going to pull for Venmo. Google Pay and Apple Pay, those are great as long as you're only using those systems and they can be linked to a reloadable debit card, but that also has a fee. So really depends. There's a fee to transfer on the Apple Pay, which you also have to consider, but Apple Pay is one way that people have been paid. Now, when we talk about gift cards, this is always very interesting because we hear this, right? Like, oh, well, we want to pay our parents in the most equitable way. Cressy and I can both say that we've been paid in specialty gift cards. My favorite, and I wish Monique was here. Monique and I, about 1.5 years ago, were in a meeting and they had a raffle. And you know, I love raffles. I love giveaways. Okay. They had a giveaway for an Aldi's food store card. I want to be very clear. The tank of gas that would have taken me was worth more. Like it would have came out of my pocket to go to the Aldi's store. Okay. So I won this card that I couldn't use. And I emailed the lady. I was like, will you please send it to Monique? She's got her stepkids up for the summer. And she's in an area where I know there's an Aldi's, right? So the accessibility of these specialty is very, very difficult. The state of Michigan just recently held a whole bunch of maternal health equity roundtables, and how they said, oh, we're doing $50. And I was like, oh, great. I'll have all these people come, right? Yeah, they put it into like 250 gift cards that you could choose from. In rural Michigan, you know what our options were? Amazon. Now, if I am trying to be conscious about the system in which I am in and how they don't have, I'm trying to be socially conscious, right? I'm not necessarily going to use Amazon for the simple fact that I used to have brothers who worked there and they were not allowed to have a union. I know how my brothers were treated. I'm not going to get an Amazon card. And anybody who ever hears a story about how I broke my ankle last year, it was with late stage capitalism as I was recycling an Amazon box. So I already have trauma associated with Amazon. So that really limited what I could and could not participate in because of a specialty gift card. So you don't pay your staff in gift cards, right? To Aldi's. You don't pay your contractors in gift cards. Don't pay your parents in gift cards unless there's another barrier that they have by being undocumented or cannot receive the funds in another way. But that, once again, circle back, get to know your parents. So let's hear from Kara and Monique, and this is our last video, and then we're going to be rounding out.
Take number 23. maybe not.
So there's a few boards that I've sat on before that gave gift cards. Pros and cons. I sat on a board that gave me like a gift card to Myers, and I got a gift card to I think Myers is only a Midwest thing.
In Michigan.
So
pretty much only Michigan, I believe.
really, okay.
Maybe Indiana, but
So just a grocery store, right?
mm-hmm.
I'm like, but I know in some areas they don't have this grocery store. Just like all these things, which is another grocery store that's in bigger cities, but I know in rural Michigan and in other areas they don't have these stores. So getting paid in certain type of gift cards, definitely not, it's not the wisest thing because it's not, can't be used for in all places.
Mhm.
I think I've also been paid with a Visa gift card, which those are easier and actually better than the other gift cards because I'm able to use it
Yep.
to pay a bill or to
Yeah.
and yeah. Which one have you ever been paid with a gift card before?
Yeah, I've been paid with gift cards. I've been paid like the store gift cards, like you said. I've definitely been paid with Meyer gift cards. Too. I mean, being in Michigan, so that seems to be the store that Michiganders like. But so, and then I've definitely the Visa, and 100% I would say the Visa gift cards are by far the my favorite. Like,
if we had to be paid in
Yep.
gift cards, yeah, the Visa.
that
is
would be
definitely-
I think sometimes I'd be rather paid in Visa gift cards than a check. Like cash or Visa gift cards. Give me both. either one of them
Yeah.
is what I would probably take 100 times over. But
Oh, and then Amazon too. I've been paid with Amazon gift cards.
oh yep, I have been paid, or online cards. And
Uh-huh.
the online
Mhm.
cards are, even if you do online shopping, you can never go over the amount.
Yeah.
And if you do, you can't purchase the item, so you're always leaving a balance
Yeah.
in limbo somewhere.
Yeah.
And
You can never actually get the whole amount that's actually on there.
yeah, you're always leaving
I think
some
I
kind of
have
them. Yeah.
gift cards with like 48 cents, 15 cents. I'm like, well, these add up. Can I?
Right?
How do
Can
I
I
use
pool them together? Yeah, and you can't. You
Yeah,
cannot pool them
right.
together, because me and Ray have both gotten like digital Visa gift cards
Mhm.
for digital online, and they're supposedly Visa, but they cannot be pooled together.
Yeah.
And you can't. So like his 25. So it's like I bought something for $23. He bought something for 24. And and then even if taxes go over, then you're
Yeah.
like you can't add your own debit card onto them
Mhm.
to cover the taxes, or you just use that as a discount. It's just
Right.
they're like
I
it's
feel
They're just gone in
number
space.
23.
That's where they're gone. So I know that we only have a couple minutes. Cressy, do you want to just have everybody reflect for a moment?
Sure. So we've covered a lot of different things today. It sounds like some organizations are doing some things, and maybe some others of you are too. You just didn't share that out today. But reflecting, kind of, have you considered flat rates, and what would that look like for your families? Does your agency take into account the benefits cliff when you figure out how you're going to pay families? And then who in your organization is the systems champion for policy change? Because some of these things your agency might not be doing, and certain people in the agency might not be as flexible as others. Change is hard. And there's, when you're looking at, especially money, from a human services standpoint, there's one lens, and then the accountants tend to see it a different way, and that's okay. But you have to have those people that are willing to have those difficult conversations about, this is why it matters to us as an agency. This is why it matters to the people that we serve and the families that we're trying to work with. Because, like Meredith said, like the cash is king, there would be some pearl clutching from the accountant side, and that's okay. And like the agency that I work for, like they hate gift cards because there's this whole misnomer that I'm going to rage a little here about how they're going to spend the gift card. You know what? How they spend that gift card is not your business. Just going to put that out there. So thinking about that person that's willing to stand up and be that voice for the families and listen to what they have to say in your meetings, and then take that back to your people, that if there is need for policy change, and then even pushing it further beyond your organization into a whole systems change.
Yeah,
lot
and
of
to
work.
piggyback off of that, like if we are looking at, are we paying our parents in an equitable fashion, right? What bucket do they fit in? Is that appropriate pay for your area, for your cost of living?
Right.
Because remember, we are here And Mitten Mamas is very much into watching families thrive, not just survive. And so when we're looking at that benefits cliff, what does that mean in your community for your state? Why are we having families always trying to survive if someone's on Social Security disability? So policy can be within your own system, right? In your own hub, but policy can also be bigger. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the champion in your agency, but maybe a sister agency, or maybe a brother nonprofit, right? Looking at who are those systems people who can help make that effective change. Champions are great. Champions, I don't know, like Cressy and I were both on the policy change that raised the child care subsidy for the state of Michigan, because we were the lowest rate to 180% above poverty level. That was huge in our communities. And that took our systems champs. So we could have more families who could benefit from the child care subsidy. So we know firsthand how important it is to have those systems champs to change not only a big policy, but a small policy, right? So I always want to encourage that. And that goes to that community building and making sure that we're really looking at families in an equitable way, because this is why we have jobs in the system, is because of families and their input to make the system better. And I know that we are running out of time, so I really want to say Chimagwech, thank you. Like I know, like, we are honored as Mitten Mamas to be doing this work. We have done presentations in the past, but I really, really want to say thank you to the education of Oregon for having us come and do this. This has been a great experience for us. It really allowed for us to take this framework of theory in the last 2 years that we've been working on how do we implement this, to be able to try it with all of you good folks. And we're really hoping that you gain something, even if it's a little something, from, you know, parents who are trying to do this good work and have been doing this good work for so long. And so I just wanted to say Chimagwech and thank you on behalf of Mitten Mamas for the ability and for the experience that we have gained doing this. And so I just wanted to say thank you from all of us.